You've got questions?
Would you pay Darby right now $14 million?
We've got the answers. Bills Fanatics Network.
The Bills make me wanna.
Hey there, Bills Fanatics. Ryan Lasel here. Day one of training camp is in the books, and going to be answering any questions that you guys may have. Looking for any reaction. Was down on the sidelines today, covering camp for Rock Sports Net and the show Bills Fanatics. Good day at camp today. Nice weather. A lot of fans wound up showing up. So, again, if you have questions, go ahead and throw them in the comments. I'd like to make sure I thank Pierre and the Bills Fanatics for allowing me to jump on here and answer some questions that you guys may have. So, first we'll talk about the surprises and the top performers at camp today. The first one that jumps to mind for me is Dez Lewis. Kid played really well today. Seemed to capitalize on his success that he's had coming into OTAs, out of OTAs, and into training camp. Dez Lewis was definitely a surprise at camp today. Went up and got a couple of passes, a bad pass by E.J. Manuel. He went up and climbed the ladder and brought it down. So, definitely Dez Lewis is looking to fight through and win that third wide receiver position behind Robert Woods and Sammy Watkins. Another surprise today was James Wilder actually taking second running back snaps behind LaShawn McCoy. That was something that I don't think a lot of Bills fans thought they'd see. It seemed like it was going to be Michael Gillislee that was going to pick up most of those carries, but it actually wound up being James Wilder running with the second string offense behind LaShawn McCoy. Cornerback position, another battle that we're really watching behind Gilmore and Darby. The question is, can Nickell Robey hang on to that nickel cornerback position? Right now, Corey White seems to be the guy that may have the inside track on that, even though you've got other guys out there like Sterling Moore and Javier Arenas. I thought that Javier Arenas played well today, although reports from Joe Buscaglia was that he didn't play very well. One-on-one drills that I saw, I thought that he was effective. Not against the best of the best. Obviously, Sammy's not out there, but definitely I thought he held his own for the most part. So, Mike with a question. Appreciate it, Mike. Any sign of Jonathan Williams? Jonathan Williams was out there. He was running with the second string, third string most of the day. He didn't get a lot of carries with the first string. I didn't get a lot of opportunity to take a look at him, but he certainly was out there. He seemed like he's got some speed to him, and a guy that if you watch the tape on him at Arkansas, that seems to be the guy that he is. Whether he can carry that in and be effective in the NFL, it's yet to be seen. But right now, it looks like Jonathan Williams is firmly fourth, maybe even fifth on the depth chart at this point, behind McCoy, Wilder, Gillislee, and potentially even Carlos Williams once he comes back. So Jonathan Williams, I think, has some work to do. Let's remember he was only a fifth-round pick, so it's possible that he could get cut. I mean, they do cut guys that get drafted fourth round and behind, so it's always possible that that's an option for him. I'm rooting for Dez Lewis as well. I think, definitely his height will help. It's something that the Bills haven't had in quite a while. And he's a guy who can go up and get it. He uses his height, uses his size, and he certainly knows how to maximize that talent that he's been given physically. Pierre, any insight on how Kevin Seymour looked? Seymour looked good. I mean, he was a rookie. You could tell that it was his first live action that he's had in the NFL. In one-on-one drills, he held his own. He wasn't spectacular, but he didn't get burned, which is really all you can ask for at a rookie cornerback position at this point in time. As he works in more with the ones and twos, I think he's going to be a guy who's going to make an impact. I think he probably makes the roster. I don't know if he pushes Robey or Sterling Moore for additional playing time, at least not yet. He may be a guy who you start to see get worked in a little bit more as the season progresses. Nick, Dez Lewis ceiling floor. I mean, floor, practice squad, that's what we saw him on last year. That's probably his floor cut. They've got a lot of guys at the wide receiver position. I think they're just trying to throw as many guys against the wall and hoping that somebody sticks. ceiling for him, I mean, if he can put it together, he's physically a number one receiver. I mean, obviously I don't think he's going to overtake Sammy for a number one position, but he's the type of guy, body size and type, and again, he's a guy that will climb the ladder and go catch a football, and that's what Buffalo needs. So, I mean, ceiling for him, I think you can expect him to potentially turn into a legitimate number two receiver opposite Sammy Watkins, which would allow Woods to move into the slot and work a little bit more in a position that I think fits him a little bit better. Anthony Listenby, he wasn't out there. He's not playing at this point in time. So, he's a speed guy, and that's what he is. He needs to work on his catches. He had a lot of drops in college, and that's certainly something to be concerned with. So, Listenby as a potential number two, he's got a lot of work to do if he's going to turn into a number two receiver behind Sammy Watkins. And he's got a lot of guys to beat out. You got Woods and Hankerson and Little and Salas and again Des Lewis. All those guys had solid days today, and the longer Listenby sits on the bench because he's injured, the longer it's going to take him to get worked in and potentially pick up on reps. So overall quarterback play today, I mean, I think everybody looked a little bit more relaxed. Certainly from last season, it seems like everyone knows where their position is. Tyrod is certainly entrenched in the number one. We know that. E.J. Manuel, I think, feels confident that he's entrenched as the number two, and certainly Cardell Jones knows that he's probably the number three guy looking to develop as much as he can. I think Jones is probably going to play well enough to wind up being on the 53-man roster, simply so they can make him develop and probably make him inactive on a day-to-day or game-to-game basis. But I think Cardell Jones has a lot of work to do. He's certainly got a huge arm, but he did have quite a few overthrows and some timing issues. Drew from Bills Fanatics, how did Marshall Morgan look today? I mean, he looked good. He hit all of his field goals, which is something you can't say for Dan Carpenter, who missed 2 field goals inside of the 50-yard line or inside of 50 yards, which that's been his strength over the past 2 seasons in Buffalo, is that he's pretty much automatic from inside of 50, and that wasn't the case today. Marshall Morgan has a big leg. I think he's got some ground to make up in terms of obviously being an undrafted rookie. He's got some ground to make up in terms of taking Carpenter's job, but he's got a strong leg. I think he can handle kickoff duties, and I think he can probably handle field goal duties. If he continues to hit field goals on a regular basis, I think Carpenter definitely has something to worry about in terms of a job. Stryker played an outside linebacker position today. So he's worked a lot in with the special teams. I think he's, probably a guy who's fighting for a roster spot, and I think his special teams acumen is going to lend him the potential to make that roster. If he continues to play the way he played today, I think he probably sneaks in there as a special teams guy. I don't know how much time he's going to see on the actual defensive side of the football this year, but Stryker is a guy who can definitely make it to the 53-man roster as a special teams type of guy. He's a high motor type of guy. So, Mike, thanks for the question there. Nick, someone who impressed me the most today, I'm going to go back to Des Lewis. I mean, the guy looked good. He looked solid. He looked like a guy who can develop into a number 2 wide receiver. Another guy that I haven't talked about yet is Gilmore. Gilmore is a guy who is fighting for a contract. Bills fans are very skeptical of whether he deserves that contract or not. But I thought he came out and played extremely well today. He had an interception of Tyrod Taylor early on in 7-on-7, and he had an almost interception not a couple plays later. Really locked down anyone that lined up in front of him. He got shook once by Hankerson, but it was really a kind of a triple move on a slant, and it, Gilmore didn't make contact at the line of scrimmage, and that really made it difficult for him to cover that potential pattern. But again, he's going to have inside linebacker help in that defensive scheme, so that catch probably doesn't get made in an actual game. But Gilmore looks like a guy who's ready to make a jump to becoming an elite cornerback at this point in time. Is Rob Ryan real hands-on out there? Rob Ryan was the most hands-on coach that I saw outside of Ed Reed. I posted a picture on my Twitter handle. Make sure you go check it out, at Ryan Lasel. Ed Reed was very hands-on, but Rob Ryan was right out there. I mean, he was directing guys, directing traffic, talking to defensive players on a consistent basis. You can tell he gets it. You can tell he understands the defensive scheme, and I think it's going to lend a lot of assistance to Rex in terms of teaching the defense. He really let that happen with Rob, and Rex kind of was able to move around between positional groups throughout workouts. How does it feel, Pierre? How does it feel being in the media and on the field? For those of you who don't know, this was my first training camp and my first actual practice on the field, and it was an awesome feeling. It was something that was extremely cool to experience. I wish everyone got the opportunity to experience something like that, because it gives you a different angle at practice, and it gives you the opportunity to focus on certain things as opposed to sitting in the stands where you're subject to what you can see. Being part of the media allows you to move around a little bit more and have a little bit more free reign of practice, which certainly helps quite a bit. Melissa, how did our QBs look today, especially in the backup position? I think EJ's the backup right now. He played well. He played like a guy who's comfortable. He played like a guy who knows his role. He was poised. He, connected on his throws. Last year, this time, he was overthrowing, underthrowing guys, skipping passes. He had very few bad balls today, which is really saying something for EJ, considering the struggles he's had in practices in the past. But I think again, Cardell is third, EJ's second, and unless something drastically changes, Tyrod goes down with injury, Tyrod's your starter going into the year. But right now, the way EJ's playing, and I think hopefully it carries on through training camp and into the preseason games, I think Bills fans are going to feel pretty comfortable with EJ Manuel at the backup quarterback position the way he played today. Joe, what does the tight end situation look like past Clay? Can O'Leary see time? Right now behind Clay, it's Gregg. Chris Gregg got the majority of the snaps behind Charles Clay today. Even in some two tight end situations, it was Clay and Gregg on the field at the same time. I think O'Leary did see some time in some of the big packages, double tight end. There was one specific play that came to mind where O'Leary split wide, and you had Felton and Gronk in the backfield. O'Leary went in motion and actually cracked down on the defensive end, and it was a pitch to the left side with Gronk, with Felton leading the way, which is an interesting lineup, I thought. But I think O'Leary can get time. It's going to be between him and Dre, really, at this point in time. Dre was brought in because he's a blocking tight end, something that Clay and Gregg aren't bad at, but they aren't the best at either. So if O'Leary can establish himself as a blocking tight end and someone who can do that effectively, I think he can find himself a roster spot this year. Sean Santra get any reps? Santra was inactive today. He was with the conditioning group, so he was with Carlos Williams, Sammy Watkins, and Manny Lawson. Those guys were all working out together off to the side, conditioning. So that's all the information we have on Sean Trell. He didn't practice today. He was just working out on the side. Any surprising players who looked bad out there? One guy who I was surprised that I didn't become impressed with was Sterling Moore. I thought he got beat a couple of times that he really shouldn't have as a veteran cornerback. And he's a guy who, at this point in time, if he doesn't start to step up, he's a veteran, and I don't think they're going to have any trouble cutting bait with him, which is disappointing because I thought he was going to be an effective guy coming into camp. Now, it's only day one, and it's only the first 2 hours of practice, so I'm not going to get too concerned about Sterling Moore's position at this point in time. But he's a guy who really did surprise me. I thought he was going to step up a little bit more in his first day as a Bill than he did. Nick, how obvious is the energy on the field compared to the Marrone days? I mean, it's night and day. There's music playing, there's guys dancing, there's joking being had, but it's all serious. It all gets pulled back, and ultimately these guys are here to do a job, and I think they realize that. Last year at camp, it was a lot of upbeat, a lot more, we're going to do this, whereas now it's we've got to do this. These guys understand that there's a lot riding on this particular season. Corey Graham had a couple of instances where he pulled Ronald Darby aside, pulled Aaron Williams aside, and kind of talked to them about a couple of plays that had happened. And guys were showing emotion. It started to get very chippy between the defensive backs and the wide receivers. Wide receivers jawing and the defensive backs jawing back, and then they started to push and, hand fight quite a bit. A couple pass interference penalties that I thought would have gotten called. It was definitely a physical. These guys understand understand that a lot of them are fighting for their positions, and it showed day one, and it's only going to amp up as camp goes. And really, the coaching staff lets it go as long as it's a disciplined type of aggression. They're allowing it to happen, and if that continues, again, I think we're going to start to see some potential fights and things like that, because these guys. We've got 53 guys that are going to make this roster, and I think you can probably name about 25, 26 guys that are guaranteed a roster spot. Outside of that, these guys are all fighting for their positions, and they all want to make sure that they're on the roster when camp closes. Pierre, talking about tight ends, how did Blake Annan look? He did. He looks small. He looks like a guy. He looks almost like he could probably convert to a wide receiver. He did have a decent catch in the flats during the shell drill, which again, it was in the flats. There was nobody really covering him. But he was pretty much non-existent from what I saw, working with the third strings with Cardell Jones and those types of guys. So he's a project at this point. He may be a guy who sneaks onto the practice squad, but it was surprising to me when I saw him because I didn't think he would look that small. Are there any leaders on this team like Arizona Cardinals' Patrick Peterson? I did see Patrick Peterson's show, and I did see some coverage on him on the NFL Network. To be honest with you, there's not a lot of guys that are vocal, screaming type leaders out there. Aaron Williams obviously is a vocal type guy. But if we're going to talk Patrick Peterson, I think, we can talk Stephon Gilmore. Again, he was a guy who really stepped up. I think he's a guy who's probably going to take that jump to the next level. But there's a lot of guys out there that lead by example rather than lead through any type of encouragement or anything like that. Corey Graham is probably the quarterback of that defense at this point in time. Joe, there's no announcements yet in terms of a camp scrimmage. Typically that's already arranged by now, so I don't expect it to happen, but certainly things change as they go. Brian, Goodwin getting cut, however, here took a lot of reps with the ones. He did. He took a lot of reps with the ones. Rex is extremely high on Goodwin. He's been since he became the coach of Buffalo. He took the majority of the reps aside from Woods and Des Lewis with the ones this week. Now, this is typically something that we see out of Gilmore every camp. He gets a lot of reps with the ones. It's undeniable that he's a guy who has talent. It's just a matter of, can he stay healthy? Can he run the routes that he needs to run? And he did look crisp out there. Goodwin's a guy, he can stay healthy. I think he finds a spot on this roster because Rex likes him. He brings a versatility with the return game, and he brings an element of speed that they don't have on the team right now, and frankly, not many teams have in the NFL at this point in time. So I think if Goodwin can stay healthy, Goodwin makes the football team. But that's a big if. He hasn't done it yet in his career. Pierre, next to Des Lewis, any other receiver stand out? Me personally, I was watching certain guys. Greg Salas was a guy I was really keeping an eye on. Leonard Hankerson was a guy I was keeping an eye on. I thought both of those guys were impressive. I think Salas is making a case to make the roster. He's a guy that has the size to be an effective receiver. He runs good routes. Same thing with Hankerson. Hankerson shook a couple of the DBs a couple of times, and he made good catches. So I think he's a guy that could potentially make the roster. Melissa Marquise Goodwin did practice. He saw a lot of time with the ones, and he's a guy that I thought he looked good for today. Just a matter of whether or not he can make the roster and stay healthy. Joe, is Felton a lock to make this team, or is the fullback position phased out? I think it's going to depend on Gronk. He's a guy that right now it's difficult for me to see a spot on the team for Gronk. But again, H-back is an extremely important position in a Greg Roman offense. So if Gronk can start to carve out a piece of the offense here, they had him take some carries. I didn't see him catch very many balls out of the backfield or anything like that, but he did take carries, which was an interesting thing for me to see. If Roman decides that the H-back is an extremely important position, I think Gronk makes the team at the expense of Felton. But right now, it looks like Felton is the fullback, and as long as they continue to use the fullback, he's going to be the guy that they utilize. Sean, I just wasn't impressed by Gronk, to be honest with you. I thought he was small. I think he's he's one of those guys that's a Marquise Gray type of player. He's not big, he's not imposing, he's a guy that's going to go out and throw some blocks, potentially catch some passes out of the backfield, but right now I don't know where his spot is on the team. I don't think we've seen enough of practice yet or enough of the offense to see at that point in time. Is the Bush saga over, or is there a chance it gets done? There's still a chance it gets done. They're still talking. And right now I think Reggie is hoping that there's a better offer that comes in because he wants to go to a team where he's going to contribute. And right now, Buffalo is probably the only team that's giving him an opportunity to actually contribute. Anyone stand out in the returns? They didn't really do many kick returns, punt returns today. It was really just kick coverage. There was one guy in, deep that was catching them, but there wasn't really any return game to be said. So more to come on the return game because they'll start to work that into practice a little bit more. Do the players appear to be cohesive and over last year's divide and all in with Rex? They seem all in right now. It seems like these defensive guys look like they're ready to go. And I think the offense seems to be gelling a little bit better. I think the offensive line had better communication today, and that consistency will help them as they go forward. But the defense is all in. The defense, a lot of talking, a lot of direction of traffic, a lot of communication amongst everybody. So everybody seems to get it. It's just a matter of can they bring it all together. There were some 3 wide receiver sets. When it was a 3 wide receiver set, they bumped Goodwin in to the slot, and they worked Des Lewis on the outside along with Robert Woods. So those are the 3 receiver sets that we saw. We didn't see a lot of them, but they were out there. I did, Pierre. Thank you for noticing. I did take a lot of pictures and videos. I am going every practice that I will go to. I will make sure I tweet it out ahead of time. So make sure you follow me on Twitter at Ryan Lasel. It's in the description of the video right now. Make sure you check me out if you want. Make sure you check me out if you want all camp coverage. I'm not going to go to every practice because, unfortunately, I'm not a full-fledged, full-time member of the media, but I will make it to a lot of practices. And, again, I'll tweet out ahead of time so you guys know which practices to follow and which practices, to maybe look elsewhere. But I will try to do a summary video every day just to kind of give everyone a heads up as to what happened at practice and things like that. Nick, what position looks the strongest, weakest? Right now, I think the odd thing is that going into camp, I thought that wide receiver was one of the biggest question marks. I think it still remains one of the biggest question marks. But the way that a lot of these guys played today, I think that the wide receiver position may wind up being a strength from third wide receiver back. Because I think they're going to have a lot of guys that could plug into that third wide receiver set. That definitely makes it a potential strength. You've got Sammy Watkins, who's a legitimate number 1. If you've got Des Lewis, who could potentially climb into a number 2 position, you've got a solid number 2, and then Robert Woods would be your 3. Or if Robert Woods is your 3, he's shown that he can be effective at it, and then you've got guys at 3 through 5 that could potentially be impact players. So oddly enough, I think one of the biggest question marks going into camp has, at least day 1, shown to be potentially a strength of this team, and that's just they have a lot of bodies that can do the job, which is certainly extremely encouraging. Cornerback position, same thing. I think they've got some guys who are starting to step up already, and that's definitely good to see. Weakest position right now is the defensive line. I mean, Kyle Williams didn't practice. Marcel Darius didn't practice today. So, that's a weakness right now. They did go out and sign defensive linemen. I think they saw the weakness at this point. The defensive front was, led by Adolphus Washington and Corbin Bryant right now, and they're good players, but they're not the effectiveness of a Kyle Williams and of Marcel Darius. So right now, I think defensive line is the weakest. Hopefully that starts to strengthen as things go. Manny Lawson should come back and add some depth because he'll play that outside linebacker, defensive end hybrid type of position. And defensive line should strengthen up as these guys start to return back. Sean, I appreciate the follow. Everyone who followed me today, I picked up about 100 plus followers today. So everyone who followed me on Twitter, I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me that you guys are trusting me to cover cover the Buffalo Bills for you. Bills Fanatics, I appreciate the opportunity to cover the team on their behalf. Same thing with Rock Sports Network. It means a lot. So thank you everyone who posted questions. Again, I'll make sure that I do a question and answer session after each practice that I attend. Make sure you check us out on Facebook, Bills Fanatics BF. Also make sure you check out the Bills Fanatics show on Rock Sports Net. Brandon and I actually covered the EJ Cardell battle a little earlier in the video, so I'm wrapping up. Unfortunately, I won't direct it again, but just it was at the very beginning of the video, so just restart the video once I'm done, and it'll cover that question for you. So again, thank you everybody for joining me. If you feel free to hit me up on Twitter, hit me up on Facebook. If you guys have any questions that I didn't get to, I'll be sure to answer them as best I can. Otherwise, thank you again for Bills Fanatics Network for allowing me to do this. Thank you very much for Rock Sports Net. Brandon, not a problem, man. Again, I covered it earlier. I know you just joined, but a couple people had questions on it, so I did hit it for, a couple minutes. So feel free to hop back to the beginning of the video, and you'll get all your questions answered about that. Thanks a lot, guys. Thanks, Mike, Brandon, Sean, Nick, all you guys who posted questions. I appreciate it. And thanks again to the Bills Fanatics and Rock Sports Network. And as always, guys, go Bills.